Going to move on now to our next presenter. Wesley King supports technologies that are squarely aimed at bettering humanity and the planet, which is great and very reflective of a lot of the technology we've seen over these last days. He's a team of cross-functional experts focused on personalized wellness, wearables, biohacking, digital health, and consciousness technologies. Hey, Wesley. We've got you. There we go. Great.
Hey there. How are you?
How are you doing?
I'm good. Great to talk today. Can I get started?
Yes, please do. We can see your desktop. So if you want to jump up onto slide view, that would be great.
Absolutely. How's this
Awesome.
look?
Perfect.
Thanks, Phil. All right, everyone. Excited to talk today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself before we get started. I'm mostly powered by dark chocolate almost every day. That's my go-to accelerant of choice. I'm known as the biohacking banker because I'm not only very into biohacking myself, but I wanted to get into investment banking and fundraising and also investing specifically through the lens of looking at biohacking, consumer tech and hardware, software, digital health, telemedicine, and what that really means to the consumer and how healthcare gets consumerized. So I'll talk a lot more about that today. I started a firm called Coherent Capital with a nod to both brain and heart coherence, as well as lasers, really just to focus on this intersection of hardware and hybrid software into the cloud and the deployment of algorithms that can help people en masse. So my journey into this was essentially with a 2016 realization that personalized health was here to stay, aside from all the trends in both diets and in just some of the wellness stuff that's been mentioned around Goop, for example. If you look through the trends, what's here to stay is both what I call self-health, that's understanding your own health picture and being able to modulate that, and then personalized health and precision medicine. So no matter what trends pop up, that's going to stick around because you're always going to have a more impact if you understand a picture of yourself. My whole health journey started about 10 years ago when I was exposed to black mold for about 3 years. I lost my long-term memory, was unable to work very well, and started to explore what was happening to my brain and body and found neurofeedback and specific kinds of diets and really got into biohacking from there. I lead a large community in Los Angeles. We have one of the most active biohacking groups in the US. We talk a lot about the intersection of university research and then consumerization of healthcare. I've won a bunch of designs in corporate innovation. I'm a very creative person and I like to teach creativity, and I've always liked to support ideas and watch them go through stages to commercialization. About 4 years ago, I got into banking specifically to work with health technology companies. And I built a very large database kind of looking at the entire globe, seeing who out there is investing in health technology, especially those willing to take some risk in consumer. So today we'll go through kind of what my definition of biohacking is. I think it's important to define that so you can understand the market. We'll also talk about the age of what I believe is personalized proof, and then look at the market size of health technology overall. And then probably what people are most interested in here, look at some of the success stories in neurotechnology fundraising. So my definition of biohacking is essentially intentionally modulating the inputs that go into your biology. And these can range from all these things listed here, from light to sound to touch, and even the thoughts that are going through your head. So intentionally modulating those and then measuring the outcomes, coming up with actionable insights, and then ultimately determining the best mix for you. That essentially is setting your own baseline and then adding things in and determining what's changing on your baseline. So if you think about it that way, I believe we're going from the age of measurement, where we've now have these amazing biometric wearables. You can actually measure mitochondrial activity, your telomeres, your microbiome, your epigenetic expression, even your flow. So over the last 5-10 years, we've gotten these amazing instruments to measure. And we're entering the age of aggregation or integration, where you're starting to get a picture of your holistic health, how that fits into a population, maybe ties into different platforms, some of those platforms on the consumer side, some entering into the healthcare side through electronic medical records. But ultimately, you're aggregating and integrating a picture of who you are. And then now we've got the age of proof. So all these things that claim to be able to heal you or put you into a better or healthier state, now we can actually measure some of those things against the picture of what your baseline is. So those will range from services and devices all the way down to lymphatic drainage and your ability to get deep sleep in the decades leading up to your 60s to make sure that you're actually pushing out the potential of you getting neurodegenerative diseases. I've seen a lot of interesting things around that. But ultimately here is the proof. You can actually see what works for you and others around you. So the overall market is very varied, and we'll go into some of that. So NeuroTech itself is going to about 19 billion by 2026, but I want to show you some of the trends underlying the consumer side so you can get a picture of where we are in context. So the biohacking market in general is growing very fast, about 20% a year. The global wellness industry, as was pointed out earlier, is over 4 trillion. The self-improvement market is huge as well. Wearables starting to decline a little bit. A lot of investment went into that about 3 to 5 years ago. The sports medicine market is also big. And then the alternative medicine market, which was already mentioned, but these include things like yoga, meditation, acupuncture, is also very big and growing. Within the context of digital health, this year you have had an explosion into investments in telemedicine and other analytics platforms. And within that, you've also got a lot more money going into wellness and mobile health. And as I mentioned earlier, wearables is a big market, but it is starting to decline. I like to point out where we're going with mental health, another big uptick within digital health and just health overall. A lot of funding this year and a lot of rounds. And this was even from Q1 before COVID really hit. I really love this chart from What If Ventures, one of the top mental health investors, really showing that what they invest in is taking people from the reactive side of the landscape into the proactive side, giving them more of a locus of control over their own life, and showing that they're trying to unveil those that are untreated and misdiagnosed and help them and invest in technologies that are helping them. Really quickly, I'll cover some of the COVID impact on what's happened in the market. You've seen an increase in telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, and just generally remotely managing health. You've also seen an increase in biometric awareness, like we're talking about blood oxygenation, we're talking about respiration rate, we're talking about skin temperature. So there's more of biometrics entering into the conversation. There's same-day test results and the ability to actually get more of a closed loop, fast loop feedback on what's going on in your body, and an explosion of online communities. There's been a dip in mental health, connection, and community. We're seeing more virtual communities spin up, but there's that missed human connection. And unfortunately, a lot of increase of misinformation over COVID. So now we'll get more into, if you're a company looking to raise money, some of the broad trends I've seen in buckets I've put people into within different categories. On your ultra high net worth kind of billionaire level side, those people are very interested in longevity in general, and are just interested in taking as much control as they can over their lifespan and health span. VCs are really looking for you to create a category or at least dominate it. Obviously, SaaS, they're able to plug it into their models and see how the valuation works out, and also if you're actually outperforming those that they're also looking at. Digital health carries much less risk. Hardware is always going to be difficult. On the corporate VC side, you've got this incredible ability to roll it out to a ton of employees, and so there's a little bit more of an interest in employee wellness and benefits. And family offices are looking for impacts on large populations or unmet needs. Again, this is all generalization, but just so you know, and I can share what I've learned. NeuroTech in the recent years, really looking at brain-computer interfaces, neuroprosthetics, non-invasive monitoring, and neurostim devices. This is where some of the funding has gone in recent years. So if you look broadly at what's currently receiving funding, you've got those that are saying we're looking to treat depression, Alzheimer's, and neurodegenerative diseases through different interesting modalities. You've got these measurable kind of outcomes that they're promising. So going after stress and anxiety and sleep. You've got an explosion of app-based wellness and the ability to address markets that were previously unaddressed. Remote collaboration has taken off. This isn't NeuroTech, but one of my favorite companies does collaboration in real time in VR for molecular proteins and drug discovery. So you've got scientists from every time zone collaborating over a specific molecule in VR. Real time in pretty much any side of health and wellness is getting more and more interesting, and you're able to get quicker feedback loops. And then brain-computer interfaces, taking small signals and actually being able to turn those back into action controls in real time. Very interesting, and receiving funding. So a broad picture of the recent NeuroTech funding market. I'll not mention many technologies and companies here, but you've probably know about Kernel and Paradromics, Flow Neuroscience, Halo Neuroscience, and I listed out some of the funding rounds here, but I also wanted to share some of the investors that are consistently investing in this space. I would be remiss if I didn't call out Loop Ventures, which is making some very interesting investments in NeuroTech and even in blood glucose monitoring through the company levels. So I really like what they're doing here. You can always reach out to me. I've got a lot of research on who's funding what and at what stages. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges and bottlenecks I see, and this is in overall biohacking and also in neurotech. So one thing is that the extreme side of biohacking and neurotech is what makes the headlines, and that comes with a degree of risk for those of us trying to build things that aren't that extreme. So everything from the people that are obsessed with longevity and having slight God complexes, wanting to live forever, all the way to putting implantables in a pig and kind of throwing that out as a huge PR stunt. And then the implantables inside of the do-it-yourself biohacking also gets all the headlines, gets all the Netflix documentaries made about it. And I think in general, we need to think about all these industries and how to correctly position them for better PR. It's really hard to raise money right before manufacturing. You're asking the investor to take a lot of risk. So do as much in the round before that to plan for, and also get manufacturing partners around that time of launch and of prototyping. One big challenge I see, and also opportunity, is to create a bridge between consumer health and traditional healthcare. So these are going to be, I think, collaborating with hospital innovation teams, healthcare innovation teams, and taking some of the things we're learning on the direct-to-consumer side into traditional healthcare. Even making sure our nurses and doctors are healthy, for example. In general, and this applies to both biohacking technology and neurotech, there is a lack of user experience focus. I think we need more product managers in the field and more diversity of thought. I'm not going to comment on this because there's people on this conference that are much better at this and thinking longer term out. But I think with neuroethics and the convergence of artificial intelligence technologies in implanting these things into our brain, there needs to be a lot of thought that goes into how we do that successfully, correctly, and to be able to manage our cultures and our world as a whole to stitch together the humanity that we want to create. Some of the data bottlenecks around both bandwidth, data structuring, and processing are challenges right now, and also opportunities for new startups. So this is what I share with a lot of the companies I work with. This is what it takes to really get funding: is you've got to define your category, you've got to communicate momentum, you've got to practice influence, and this is both in hiring, in selling your vision, and in starting to put yourself out there. You really have got to focus on what the user's problem is that you're solving, not just the solution that you're trying to make. Again, communicate momentum, really define the risks and costs in specific parts of your journey. And lastly, continue to communicate your momentum. Momentum, I've seen from my days in innovation and then into the startup game, is really the one thing that can kill products and projects. So one thing I'll point out, and a lot of what my team focuses on, is really determining the successful funding rounds and what got them there. And what it really boils down to is that they understand what their brand promise is to the end user. So I've listed some examples here, but some really interesting ones I'll call out. So from Rune Labs, their real brand promise is that they're cleaning data from neurosignals. Kernel, when they came out, said, and they had PR around offering neuroscience as a service. And then you've got these other more biohacking technologies, for example, Apollo Neuroscience, state change at the touch of a button, and then Mojo Vision and the world's first smart contact lens. If you can get it down to the point where you can really summarize it in just a few words, then you're well on your way to defining your category and then dominating it. I'll call out a few companies here that I really like that are still early stage. So on the left bottom is Sensei. They're doing both heart and brain coherence and actually being able to measure gamma through dry electrodes. In the middle here is the logo for Rune Labs, which I mentioned, where they're able to take in and label data for real-time use. And then on the upper right, we've got a photobiomodulation device that is going to be available to both consumers and healthcare that actually penetrates to the prefrontal cortex and help create new mitochondria through mitogenesis. So some of the major opportunities I see, kind of looking at where there are little gaps or at least large trends that are taking off. Designing devices and services for wellness tourism is going to be huge. That it was already increasing, and now even I think post-COVID there'll be latent demand for travel. The addiction and recovery space, I think, is really interesting, offering solutions to those that are trying to rewire their neurobiology for better behavior. The combination of stacking things, both devices and drugs, and even HRV and vagus integration, very interesting. And then a real trend I see emerging is doctors as data scientists taking your data, being able to tease out things and features from that data set, and then being able to offer you actionable insights. So to sum up, and again, you can reach out to me on any of this, and I've got a lot of research to share, but where I think we're going is that an individual will have a holistic health picture. They'll be able to share it with their doctor, who's essentially a data scientist for their health. there'll be a push toward passive data collection and not having to always plug in and wear things to be able to get data and then get actionable AI insights off of those. You see the push toward customization and personalization for every user, whether they're a traditional consumer customer or a user inside the healthcare system. And most interesting, maybe to me, is the intersection between biohacking, neurotech, and consciousness tech or consciousness hacking, where you're potentially able to access advanced meditative states through different hacks and get into flow state and coherence in both the brain and heart, left, right, and heart. So I'll go ahead and end it there. I'd like to keep it short today, but happy to answer any questions and go into anything further in the Q&A. Thank you.
That's really really a great overview, Wesley. And I'm going to ask you about DARPA in the Q&A.
Okay,
always interests me. Yeah, great, awesome. Thank you. That was really a great overview. Thanks. Really appreciate it.